Will you please be seated? Would you pray with me? Oh God, you have spoken in the past, and your people have been guided through all kinds of wildernesses and supported in all kinds of exiles and tribulations. Speak to us today in the midst of our own peculiar confusions. Speak to us through your law and give us a sense of order and direction. Speak to us through your gospel and transform us by your grace. Renew in us hope, for yours is the future. Amen. Can we be honest for just a few minutes? I must ask you this question. How many of you have ever had doubts concerning your Christian faith? Will you raise your hand? Pretty much most of you. After all, my grandmother told me this: believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see. We've all been tutored with that kind of pragmatism. Learn to be incredulous. Now that's a 50-cent word. Credulity is the tendency to believe a proposition without any supportable evidence. Credulity. And we have been brought up to think with incredulity. Don't buy everything that comes down the pike. There are so many scams out there, frauds, cons. And yet there are credulous people that will believe without any supporting facts. There's a difference, you see, between being credulous and being gullible. Credulity has the ability to be able to assimilate the facts and make wise decisions, and they would call you incredulous. Gullible, though, does not have the ability to do that. It's a weakness, in a sense. It's a naivete. How many of you have ever said or thought that you can get something for nothing? I see you chuckling. You know you can't get something for nothing. And yet, there are a lot of people out there selling those kind of things. One of the hardest things to get across to a young teen, if it seems too good to be true, then most likely it isn't true. What's the catch? You know, all of us, and I will tell you, there have been times when I have committed the sins of credulity. Just show up for the showing of this condo and you win. You're already going to win $3,000 in prizes, a color television set, and a brand new boat. You go out there and I'll guarantee you listen to that hard sell and you're going to get $3,000 worth of coupons. 20% off at the dry cleaner. Now, some of you can chuckle you would go once, but I've been 2 or 3 times. I want to believe that maybe there's a good deal out there somewhere. But what I get is a waste of time. And we can, in a sense, understand Thomas's incredulity, his skepticism. Seeing is believing, and touching is even better. He's a worldly man, and if we are not worldly in one sense, we will be taken advantage of. And Thomas doubts because he doesn't have enough evidence to support the proposition. And most of us will admit that is a leap for us regarding Christian faith. But there is, my friends, a difference between doubt and unbelief. And I want you to understand and distinguish between the two. Now, in this gospel lesson, I don't agree with the translation when Jesus says, "Do not doubt, but believe." The word doubt there is really unbelieve or no belief. There is a philosophical difference. And if you'll allow me to explain that to you. Doubters, true doubters, are on a quest. They're looking to find the truth. They read things, they search for things, they ponder things, they reflect on these things. They're on a journey. But on the other hand, unbelievers are searching for things that of lesser value. Even though the doubters and those of faith search for some sense of security, some sense of paying the bills and the mortgage. This, however, for the unbeliever is the focus of his or her life. And they have faith because they think that's going to bring peace to their soul. They believe in something. It's just not the God of theism. A doubter has 1,000 questions for God. Now, how many of you in your own minds, you can raise your hand, have a maybe it's even written, but it's written in your heart, of questions that when you get to the kingdom of heaven, you're going to have God answer? I got about 2,000. And for the life of me, sometimes I think when I get there, it's not going to matter. But I am haunted by questions. The doubter sometimes is haunted by those same questions. What are we? What are we doing here? Do we matter as individuals, or are we more seen collectively? Are we a random accident in the cosmos of the universe? Is there truly a God? If there is a God, what kind of God is that God? What is the purpose of life? And then it gets really sticky when we get into Trinity and divinity questions. Fully divine, fully human, and I can't rationalize that. I'm going to ask God when I get there what that means. But a doubter studies, listens, opens, reads. But an unbeliever doesn't think on thoughts of God. Questions rarely haunt them. The unbeliever struggles with those more mundane things of life, as I mentioned. And yet they seem not to ponder, what does all of this mean? The difference between doubt on one hand and unbelief on the other is also the difference between credulity on one hand and gullibility on the other. I'll show you a good example. How many, you remember the emperor's new clothes? In case you have forgotten, a brief synopsis of the monarch notes or cliff notes of the emperor's new clothes is, this king is extremely gullible. He can't help it. He doesn't have the tools for rational thought, but he does have a penchant for looking good so the crowds will like him. So he hires these con artists that he does not know to make him a new set of clothes, and different than anyone else would have. And they start weaving and doing all these things to him, except it's invisible. And he believes he has these nice clothes, but all the reader can see is this little overweight king in his boxer drawers. And here he goes. He marches down in his kingdom, this gullible king. But the people all begin to see him in the clothes. And that's credulity. They have the faculties to be able to tell he is naked, but they do not. Doubters are often incredulous. Unbelievers sometimes are gullible. They buy into the swindle that they have been created this special garment apart from anyone else. They will stick out. I wonder sometimes why people doubt and don't believe. And I think there are approaches to it. Oftentimes the people leave the church and the faith because they doubt what they've been taught and the way they've been taught. Now, if the blame is going to be fairly placed, it's going to be at the pulpit. They have been taught that oftentimes the ones I hear and speak to, that God is an angry God of vengeance, wants to strike them down unless they get it right, turn or burn. Some Sunday school teachers might reinforce that. There's a hardcore literalism when they read the Bible. And eventually it ends up what they're taught is science is way over there and is evil, and the only thing that really matters is what's right there written in the Scriptures. And it's little wonder when they're taught like this that people leave the faith. You can sing that song, Give Me That Old Time Religion, but I will add the verse, it may be good enough for thee, but it's not good enough for me. That's what they'll tell you. Another way that you become an unbeliever, not just a doubter, is the rejection of parental values or cultural values. The unwillingness to submit to a sense of authority, whether it's parental, governmental. Rejection of cultures. You know, that faith that mom and dad had, well, look at them. They're so flawed. What hypocrites they are. So their faith must be wrong. Oftentimes, they simply just don't want to be accountable to anybody. They want to do what they do when they do it and have no one question whether they should be doing it. To this I say, this kind of unbelief, how juvenile. Grow up. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's more to faith and Christianity than only what some errant preacher taught you, or some errant Sunday school teacher taught you, or parent taught you. It's more than a system of rules, of do's and don'ts. Perhaps the true Christian faith lies beneath all of that layer. That's the outer layer